Advent marks the arrival of healing. Advent, spiritual Advent, it's the arrival of trauma's transformation. It is the arrival of the transformation of our individual trauma, our communal trauma, this cosmic trauma we're in. It's the arrival of its transformation into spiritual resilience. And this resilience is the forever resilience. We call it salvation and rescue and faith. And it's all centered in the arrival of the Savior, this hoped for, prophesied about, dreamed of Messiah, the once and future King, who's both human and God. But Advent comes in the darkest season. It's the time when the nights are the longest. And it comes to us, all the stories, all the Advent stories are stories of fear and vulnerability and weakness. This, the arrival of this Messiah, this God-made flesh, is stunningly the arrival of a helpless baby to a humiliated family tossed around in the hard times of oppression. And the arrival of this Savior Messiah seems to be, stunningly, it seems to be the arrival of more weakness. Spiritual Advent is the arrival of trauma's transformation into resilience and salvation, but it arrives in this strange way. It arrives in the only way that trauma can be transformed. It arrives quietly in the place of powerlessness. It arrives fearfully in the place of woundedness. And it arrives as a fragile human in the place where we are trapped in the dark. We'll look at all the ways that trauma becomes spiritual resilience in these stories of Advent. But first, let me say this about trauma. Trauma is a trap. Trauma is it's a trap that keeps us from love, and it keeps us from loving. There's all these adverse experiences, there's these terrible things that happen, there's horrors, there's neglect, there's just accidents, these things that wound us and set us back. Most of the time we can heal and we can carry on. Most of the time we push through. Trauma, though, is the water-filled trap that these wounds dig and leave behind. Trauma is the trap. Sometimes it's deep, sometimes it's shallow, but it's dangerously filled with water. It's dangerously filled with drowning potential. These are the traps our unhealed or unhealable wounds leave behind. And we can fall into these traps suddenly. And when we're in the trap, it's nearly impossible to control our emotions or our reactions. And in the trauma trap, we are blocked from receiving love well. And in the trauma trap, we're blocked from giving love well. Trauma it's a trap. It's dug out by all these unhealed wounds. And in that invisible trap, we silently drown. And no one around can see why we are emotionally flailing or why we are rejecting love. They can't see the unhealed wounds. They can't see the trap that they've dug. And they can't see that we're drowning. They just see someone who can't, for some reason, love. It's a lonely, lonely place to be. Trauma is this watery, dark trap dug by unhealed wounds. But spiritual Advent is the coming of rescue. Spiritual resilience is the transformation of that trap into safety. And the astounding healing technique of trauma is this. The rescue approach to this drowning trap is this. God comes into the trap with us. And God comes into that trap in the form of human fragility and mortality. Hey, I love you too, man. It's good to see you. It's good to see you, Nick. I love that guy. This is the outrageous part of the healing technique, is that God would choose to come into the trap with us, taking on the same mortality that we have, taking on the same vulnerability that we have, and this God-made flesh rescuer at first just sits in the trap with us. Just sits in the trap and experiences the drowning, experiences the emotion and the chaos and all the blockages of love. And then our God-made flesh rescuer leans over and whispers, I can make you safe, and I want to make you safe. Our God-made flesh rescuer whispers, let me lift you out of here. Let me show you light. I love you forever and ever, and I forgive you of everything because I want you to learn to love again. So come and see. That's what the rescuer, that's what the Messiah, the Christ, says to us, and can only say to us because the Christ is down in the trap with us. The Messiah can only say that from right next to us in the trap. I love you forever. I forgive everything because I want you to learn this love. This is said to you personally. This is said to us as entire communities. And this is said cosmically to all creation, trapped and drowning. I love you forever. I forgive everything because I want you to learn this love. And so I asked, how do we respond to that message? How do we respond to that whispering voice next to us? How do we respond to that even while we are still drowning? How do we respond to the voice of the rescuer offering this spiritual resilience and salvation? Actually, how do we respond? Physically and emotionally and biologically, how do we respond? And in these Advent stories, we'll look at these responses. We'll look at muteness, like the inability to talk, being mute, the silencing of our internal lies. We'll look at barrenness, the inability to produce life, transformed into unexpected life. And we'll look at the broken heart as the place of God's great and overthrowing power. And then we'll look at the Messiah presence. As we enter into this season of Advent, this season of arrival, the arrival of the transformation of our trauma, the arrival of spiritual resilience, the arrival of this promise. Join us.